Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first WiSE seminar of the fall semester. My name is Dr. Ashley Spring and Dr. Mary Ross-Lanowski, who will be handing you tickets on the way out as proof of attendance of this seminar if you need it for extra credit for one of your courses. Please help yourself to drinks and food, and thank you for coming. Women in Science and Engineering, or WiSE. This is a program at BCC committed to the recruitment, retention, and advancement of underrepresented groups pursuing careers in science and engineering. WiSE is open to all students, and many of our events, like our seminars, are open to the public as well. Some of the things that we do are have seminars with guest speakers, such as Lauren Hall, who's going to talk to you today, workshops on careers, resume building, graduate schools, networking for future schools and employment, local excursions, career mentoring, and new this semester, we're also doing research. Today we have Lauren Hall, who's an environmental scientist from the St. John's Water Management District, talking about seagrass beds of the Indian River Lagoon. We have a seminar the third Thursday of each month. Our next one will be September 20th and October 18th and November 15th. They always take place in here, the auditorium, at 3 o'clock. All right, please give the stage to Lauren Hall. Thank you.
Hey everybody, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad I'm here. I'm glad I've got this opportunity to talk to you all today about what I do and how I got to the point where I do what I do. What I'm hoping to do today is give you some background of what I do in my job, but I also want to show you the decisions that I made along the way that have gotten me to that point. So I have to say before I start, this is the most difficult presentation I've ever had to prepare. It's been a little bit out of my comfort zone because most of the time I'm up here just presenting my data and just presenting figures about, here's what I've collected out there, here's what's going on in the Indian River Lagoon. I don't usually have to talk too much about myself. So this is a little bit out of my comfort zone, so bear with me, and I'm really hoping that I'm able to give you some good advice to help you advance your careers in the future. So as Dr. Spring said, I'm an environmental scientist with the St. John's River Water Management District. I've been working for the district for about 16 and a half years. And my focus is on marine biology. My degree is in marine biology. I mainly work in the Indian River Lagoon on seagrass and water quality monitoring. All right, so what is a marine scientist? Well, that depends on who you ask. Different people have different ideas of what constitutes a marine scientist. A lot of society, I have definitely heard the term bunny 11 tree hugger. Sometimes I do fit that description, but not always. A lot of people that I meet think that I'm working on all kinds of fancy equations and, I'm sitting there with my calculator all the time, and that's not at all what I do. My mom definitely, what my mom thought I did, well, that's true on some days. My mom thinks I'm doing the most dangerous job in the world and swimming with sharks and things like that, but that's not really what I do either. My friends think it's a big party. When I talk about work and how hard I work, they usually say, well, you work on a boat. Like, yeah, I work on a boat. Well, they think it's all fun and games. And of course, what I thought I would be doing is being down in the submarine and being able to look at coral reefs every day. What I actually do, you know what? That's not what I actually do. And I'm really glad to say that that is not what I do. This is what I do. I spend most of my time actually out in the water in a wetsuit, snorkeling in the Indian River Lagoon. And what this last picture is going to look like for you is going to depend on the decisions that you make through the course of your career. Whether or not you want your picture to be any one of these things or something entirely different is going to be up to you and the decisions that you make. So that brings me to how I'm going to kind of go through this presentation today. I want to try to let you guys know what decisions I've made along the way and help you make some of your decisions along the way. It might give you some guidance on how to make those decisions to get your career where you want it to be. All right, well, my first decision wasn't really a decision. It was sort of just something that was in me. From the time I was a very young girl, I used to go on nature walks with my grandfather, and that started probably when I was around 5 years old or so. We would go out on bird walks. I grew up in New York, totally different than this area, but we would take a lot of nature walks, nothing marine biology related at all. But what it taught me was to really love nature and to really love the outdoors, and that's where I started this journey. I also was already competitive with myself. By the time I was 7 or 8, I was keeping journals of all the birds I could identify. And I was competitive enough to say, well, how many birds could I identify without having to see them? Could I tell them by their call? How many flowers could I ID without a flower? Could I tell just by the leaves, or could I tell by how they were alternating on the stem? So from a very early age, I was very into science. I had journals that I kept, and I had my first pair of binoculars by the time I was 8. I loved every minute of it. And as you can see in this picture, I'm the only one in the picture that's holding I'm holding a fern, holding a little plant. I think these are all my cousins in this picture, and not a one of them wanted to do the nature walk, but they were all being forced to come along with my grandfather and I. All right, so I know your typical, I want to play with the whale story, I want to play with the seals, I want to play with the sea lions, but it was true. That's kind of where I started. My passion for marine biology started, again, very young. In this picture, I'm about to kiss the sea lion, and I actually kissed him right on the lips right after this picture was taken. So that led me to that decision to become a marine biologist, some of this. When I was about 7 or 8 years old, my mom and dad took me on vacation down to Florida from New York to go to SeaWorld, and that was when it hit me. I was going to be a marine biologist. I was going to swim with Shamu. That was how it was going to all work out. That was what I was going to do. And if it wasn't Shamu, I was going to swim with the beluga whales. Well, how realistic is that, you know? But at that age, that's what I thought I was going to do. So that started my quest to become a marine biologist. That's me feeding the dolphins there. I'm not even sure they let you do that at SeaWorld anymore. So I'm jumping quite a few years ahead here to high school. My love for the outdoors continued. I was hiking every weekend. I was always outside. But I started to see the value pretty quickly, not necessarily in swimming with the dolphins and the whales, but in actually studying them and in doing the science behind it, not just the show behind it. So how's the best way to study something that lives in the water? Well, I thought my next decision was I needed to get my scuba certification. So gain the tools to do what you want to do. But I was in New York. So I started to take dive lessons in New York and Pennsylvania. We didn't have the beautiful, colorful fish or the coral reefs, but we did have sunken school buses and sunken fire trucks, airplanes. This clarity right here in this picture, that's about as good as it got where we went diving. It was a Pennsylvania quarry. All of the instructors were in dry suits, and the students were freezing, trying to clear our masks and do all the things that we were supposed to demonstrate that we knew how to do for the class. So after that, I realized very quickly that I never wanted to dive in New York or Pennsylvania again, and I started to look into college and where did I want to go to college. So there's a lot of decisions, of course, that go into making that decision on where you go to college. The decision for me started with location, and that was number one. I thought I need to get to a warmer climate if this is what I want to do. So location was one of it. Another factor was does the school have the program I want to study? I wanted to be a marine biologist. I looked at a lot of schools that offered biology majors, but I really wanted that focus to be marine. So I eliminated a lot of schools just based on that alone. Another thing was the size of the school. That was really important to me. I didn't want to get lost in the shuffle. I'm somebody who, I like this kind of class size. I don't want to have to be in a class with 300 kids. My entire graduating class was 300 kids. I didn't want a single class to be like that. So I ended up picking Florida Institute of Technology, and the hardest part with that was being able to afford it. And I'm sure a lot of you are in that position now, trying to figure out how to afford school. But one of the things that I really want you guys to focus on, I don't know if anyone here is dual enrolled and still in high school, but if you are, if you know kids that are, remind them how important it is to stay focused even at that early age, because your grades in high school can help you afford college. I had scholarships, I had grant funding that I never would have had I not been focused in high school. And another thing is, you want to be able to make your decision about what school you go to. You don't want to apply and cross your fingers and hope, oh, I hope they pick me. I hope I can go there. You want everyone to say yes to you, and you want to be able to make that decision of where you go, not let them make the decision. So it's really important to stay focused and stay up. And I know that's kind of a no-brainer, but I still think it needs to be said. So once I got to Florida and I started in school, it didn't take me long. My toes hit the sand, and I was ready to get back out diving again. Entirely different kind of conditions in Florida. But one of the things you can see in these couple of pictures here, I started to get interested in the critters. I was interested in the mantis shrimp. I was interested in the jellyfish. It wasn't those, big huggable animals anymore. I was really interested in everything and how it all worked together. By the time I finished my undergrad degree, I had my advanced scuba certification, my rescue, my dive master, my night, and my rec specialty. I was ready to go. All I needed now was to find a job. All right. That brings me to what is probably the single most important decision in my career, and that is my internship. When I was getting into my junior year of college, I decided to apply for an internship at the Water Management District. I knew virtually nothing about the Water Management District. I thought they just had something to do with our drinking water. But I saw this advertised in our student employment office. I thought, well, I'm pretty confident that I can learn anything, and it sounded like an outdoor job, and I love the outdoors, so I thought I'll give it a shot. It was pretty scary, the idea of actually having a job and still doing school at the same time, but I'm always up for a challenge, so I went ahead and gave it a shot. When I went for the interview, they were asking questions like, oh, how do you feel about having bugs crawling all over you? How do you feel about snakes and long, hot days out on the airboat and things like that? And gosh, it sounded right up my alley. And maybe some people would think, oh, that's not really what I want to do. But gosh, that just sounded perfect to me. The idea of being able to finish the day and be dripping with sweat from being out in sawgrass all day just sounded perfect to me. As long as I got to be outside and not sitting at a computer, I was game. So I got the position. And one of the great opportunities that I had there, and Dr. Spring mentioned her undergraduate research program that she has going now, is I had the opportunity in that internship to do an undergraduate research project. And I want to stress the importance, if you ever have an opportunity to do something like that, it's really important to do that. To be able to start up a project that you have an interest in and see it through from the beginning of the project to doing the project, to working out the data, presenting that information, you really get that, you feel that commitment to the project. And it's just such a great opportunity, and it's especially a great opportunity if you have the chance to work with other people that are already in that field and learn from their expertise. So please take advantage of that if anyone ever offers you an opportunity to do that. I actually had one of Dr. Spring's students do an undergraduate project with me. I guess it was earlier in the summer, spring, summer, and we were out there. We had some questions about some seagrass recruitment that we just didn't have time to work on, and she was interested in it. She came on out, collected a bunch of sediment with us, got some experience out there with us, and I think she had a lot of fun and learned a lot from it. So so hopefully that'll help her get further in her career. I think it will. All right. The next decision, and this really is a decision, this is a tough one for some people, but you have to force yourself to make contact. You have to step outside of your comfort zone and introduce yourself to people. And it can be scary when it's somebody that you've heard of. You've been reading about the scientists for so long, and gosh, they're never going to remember me. But you have to do it. Ask your professors to introduce you to people. Ask your colleagues to introduce you to people. The more people you know, the better you can build that contact base. And that is what will get you a job later on. You just give presentations, even if they're scary to you. Give presentations because it will get your name out there. And that's what you really need to do. And be friendly. Be helpful to other scientists. I'm constantly collecting samples for other people, and they remember that. When you're helpful to other people, they will remember that 5 years from now, and they'll say, oh, that was that person that helped me get all those samples I needed. So, and it's definitely do each other favors. It's the way it works. Those recommendations from those people that you've helped and those people that you've made contact with can really be the difference between whether or not you get a job doing what you love and whether you don't. Those contacts that I made through my internship with the district, with other agencies, DEP, Fish and Wildlife, South Florida Water Management District, the different counties in the area, Volusia County, Indian River County, Brevard County. That's what got me my job where I am now. I started at the district as an intern. I moved down to DEP for a half a year in a temporary position. I was then offered a full-time position at the district and a full-time position at the Environmental Learning Center. And that was all through people that I had already met while doing my internship. A lot of times these temporary positions aren't advertised. They don't have to advertise them if they're just temp positions. So if you already know them, they'll go to you first. So keep that in mind. So that led me to the next decision, which is to work at the St. Johns River Water Management District. The one in red here, this is our area, and we go down to the southern Indian River County border. The Indian River Lagoon is my focus area, and that falls actually between St. John's and South Florida Water Management District. I accepted the position at the Water Management District, even though I had a job with DEP and I was offered another position with the Environmental Learning Center for several reasons. One, the internship prepped me for what the district did. I felt like I really had a good understanding of all the opportunities I would have there and a lot of room for growth in that position. There were opportunities to publish, which I really love to do. I really love to do scientific writing. And I saw the colleagues at the district doing that, and I thought I would have a lot of good opportunities to participate in that. Opportunities to present, attend conferences. A lot of them were conferences. I wanted to be able to do that too. And a really big one for me was it gave me an opportunity to go back to school to get my master's. The Water Management District paid for me to go back to FIT and do my master's program. That's changed a lot now. They do cap how much they'll pay for now. Times are tough. I think everybody knows that. But there's still opportunities there with getting more schooling and getting a more advanced degree if you want to take advantage of it. So that was really important to me to be able to go and get my master's. It's the only way I would have considered doing it. I didn't want to be thousands and thousands of dollars in debt. So when the district offered to pay for it, I went full steam ahead. I was working full time. I was taking full-time classes, and I was working on my master's research at the same time. So it was a pretty heavy load, but it was worth it because once I was done, I was done. This is the grandfather that used to take me on nature walks, so I had to put that picture up with him because I really feel like he got me started right from the beginning. All right. Okay, so I'm talking a lot about how I got to do what I want to do and how I got to my job, but I haven't really told you what it is that I do. So let me give you a little bit of background. The Indian River Lagoon, for those of you, you're probably all familiar with the lagoon, but just a quick overview. It goes, it's a 156-mile long estuary along our east coast, and it goes from Ponce Inlet all the way down to Jupiter Inlet. St. John's Water Management District stops right here around Fort Pierce, a little bit north of Fort Pierce, and South Florida Water Management District picks up from there. But I do cover the entire thing for the most part. My water quality monitoring stops down around Vero. It's made up of 3 water bodies, Ponce Inlet up in Mosquito Lagoons. This is Mosquito, Banana River here, and then the Indian River Lagoon proper, which stretches the rest of the distance. There are 5 inlets that feed the lagoon and many tributaries that feed fresh water into the lagoon, which is what makes it a brackish estuary, a mix of that salt water and fresh water. There are over 4,300 species of plants and animals that live in the Indian River Lagoon. It makes it the most diverse estuary in North America, and we have 35 threatened or endangered species that live in the lagoon. So I feel pretty fortunate to be in an area that has that much to offer. Commercial and recreational fishermen and women harvest thousands of pounds of fish and shellfish every year. They've estimated the economic contribution of the lagoon for the region and the nation's economy to be around $750 million annually. So it's huge. It's a really big deal for us to be able to protect that. So the main focus of what I do at my job is seagrass work. This is a seagrass bed down in the Fort Pierce area. You've got a few different species mixed in there. There's some fish in the background. This might even be a little further south, down by St. Lucie. Seagrass is a critical habitat. People talk about seagrass a lot because it's a really good indicator for the health of the lagoon. What's going on with our water quality will impact our seagrass. And so when you start to see diebacks in the seagrass, it really can be indicative of something else going on out there that's harming the water quality that is making the seagrass die back. It's a habitat and nursery ground for many different species. And we monitor our seagrass beds in 2 main ways. And I'm going to talk to you about both of them. The first way is through our lagoon-wide mapping program. Every 2 to 3 years since 1986, we take aerial photography of the entire Indian River Lagoon. We get up in a plane, we have photos that are taken using a special camera that we then use those photos to interpret the seagrass beds throughout the entire lagoon. It gives us a big picture view of the status of the seagrass beds. We were really fortunate that during some of the construction of the causeways, they had photos taken during 1943. So we actually have sort of a historical look at what the seagrass beds were like back then in 43, and we can compare now to then and see, are we doing okay? Or have they died back? Have they increased? What's going on there? So it gives us a really good snapshot of what the status is. While I'm on the topic of the lagoon-wide mapping, I wanted to also give you some advice on taking chances on something that's a little bit new to you. This lagoon-wide mapping for me, it's been done since 1986. I didn't start at the district until 96, but I didn't take over this project until about 5 years ago. And one of my colleagues at the district was retiring, and they asked me if I would be willing to take on the seagrass mapping project. Well, it was a $500,000 contract. And so it was a little bit daunting for me to take that on because it's a lot of responsibility. And I didn't feel like I really knew everything there was to know about seagrass maps. I still don't feel like I know everything there is to know about it. But be up for the challenge, because there's no way that your career and your position will grow if you never take on new challenges. So I went ahead and I took it on, and it has been a great experience ever since. It's been challenging. There have been times that it's been really hard, but I've learned so much. And, you know, I've gotten to the point now where I'm sort of the go-to person for seagrass maps, which is a pretty cool feeling when, you know, I mean, sometimes when the paper's telling you it's not, but still, it's pretty neat to have a project that is really your project. All right. So once we take those photos, we do an aerial triangulation and we produce ortho photos. And what those ortho photos are is a way for us to look at it on the computer from those sensors. And then once we have that, we take our photos, we try to get out in ground truth, actually in the field, snorkel through the grass beds to figure out what are the grass beds looking like so that we can then compare those with the maps that we just took, with the photos that we just took. From those photos, we're able to photo interpret the grass beds, and we can digitize those bed edges. And these are a couple of examples of what it looks like when they're doing that. So, so if you look at that top image, that's the in the field image, and the aerial photo is the one here on your right. And so you can see sort of the patchiness of the grass there, those dark patches, that's the seagrass. And this is what it would look like when you actually map it. So what can happen from maps like this is you can get information about how many acres of grass are out there right now. And you can compare what's there now with what was there before. And you can look at the data and get something like this. So this is an example of, this is actually the mapped seagrass hectares for the St. John's region. I don't have the south of Fort Pierce. I do have the data south of Fort Pierce, but I'm not presenting it right now. But what you can look at here, this is all the years down here on our x-axis. 1943 is that early historical one that I mentioned. And you can see we went down some in the 80s, and then we started to climb our way back up in seagrass hectares, the area of seagrass. And then in 2009, we were doing pretty good, and then we took a pretty big hit. So right now, I'm in the process of QAing the 2011 map, and we've got some preliminary numbers, and they're not looking so good right now because we had a very dramatic algae bloom last year that really impacted our seagrass beds, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. So the other way that we monitor our seagrass is through our seagrass transect program. And what we do for this is we run a line from shore out to the deep edge of the grass bed, and every 5 to 50 meters along that line, depending on how long it is, some of them are 1,000 meters, some of them are 20 meters, we put down a square meter quadrat, and we're able to take a variety of parameters about those grass beds. So this is the closer view. This will tell us the species that you can't tell from the map. This will be able to fill in those gaps. If we're only flying every 2 to 3 years, what's happening on the in-between? So our seagrass transects can fill in those gaps for us and let us know what's going on with the seagrass community along those transects. We do these transects in summer and winter, and some of them we actually do monthly. They were a little bit more variable, so we added in some time to do those monthly. And the parameters that we take, anything from percent cover, algae cover, how tall the grass is. We do take water quality samples at the edge of every grass bed. We want to know just a snapshot of what's the water quality looking like on the day that we're there. How is the light? How are the Secchi readings? Is there a lot of turbidity in the water? That type of information. And then from that, our environmental science group is always finding very creative ways to work up the data. I mean, we could work up the data any way you could possibly imagine. This is a big picture workup. This way, we've got it broken down into sublagoon, and the parameter that I'm looking at here is just one of the many parameters that we look at is our transect length. So I mentioned that we run the line from shore out to the deep edge. Well, that deep edge can change depending on what the clarity of the water is like and what the grass beds are doing. When the clarity is better and the conditions are right, the seagrass will grow out into deeper water. When the clarity is poor, when we have some sort of problems, a lot of storms or some sort of event that can impact it, the grass beds might contract a little bit. So that deep edge can tell us a lot about what's going on in the lagoon. It's a very good indicator of how our grass beds are doing. So what I did here is I binned the transect length and I put it into these categories. And really what I want you to see from this is looking at it by sublagoon, Mosquito, the North IRL, the Banana River section, Central, Sebastian, and South IRL. You're not seeing a whole lot of variability over the years. This is 94 through 2011, and this last year, we're looking at some declines in Banana River and North Lagoon, and again, that's related to that algae bloom, but we're not seeing a tremendous amount of variability. But if I break it into segments, if I break it into finer sections of the lagoon, we see a lot more variability. And we're seeing that this year, in 2011, we're seeing a lot of declines. When you're going from those darker colors to the lighter colors, we're seeing declines in our edge bed. If I add 2012 here, this whole area will actually look even worse than this. I just don't have my data entered yet. We just finished collecting it a couple of weeks ago. All right. Another thing that we look at is the density of the grass. Not all grass beds are created equal. Something that's really dense like this can be a different habitat for different animals than something that is sparse. So we look at that density and we want to know whether or not it's staying dense if we're having different species out there or if it's all a monoculture of one species. But what we're finding in the last couple of years is that we're seeing this density decline going from beds that look like this to beds that look like this. And then in some areas, we actually have beds that are even less covered than this now. So we're seeing some declines, and we're trying to explain what's going on out there. So here's a graph that shows those density declines, and the green line is averaged over all of our transects, and you can see it's a general decline. We have some ups and then some downs, but this 2011 is a big decline. We wanted to make sure that it wasn't just the edge of bed, though, that was declining. We wanted to look at that dense section of grass of the seagrass transect. So we went ahead and we looked at the 40 to 80 centimeter depth, too, and we're seeing declines there, too. So even in that section of the transect where we usually don't see the decline, we usually see that edge drop back, we're seeing a decline there, too. So that's concerning. All right, so what's the problem and can we fix it is the big question. Well, to determine what's causing these declines, we have to look at our water quality monitoring. So what we do is every month we collect water samples at many, many stations throughout the lagoon. We go throughout Mosquito Lagoon, Banana River, and Indian River Lagoon proper. And we do a sampling. It's a 1-week snapshot of the conditions of the lagoon that we do in conjunction with other agencies. Volusia County, Indian River County, and our group all go out the same week, and we collect samples that we send up to the St. John's Water Management District Lab in Palatka. And once they get those samples, they'll do the analysis for a variety of parameters, anything from your optical parameters, things that affect the amount of light reaching the grass beds, to your nutrients, things like nitrogen, phosphorus, things that can affect the clarity of the water, but in a more indirect way. It can affect the clarity by increasing phytoplankton growth. So we're looking at a lot of different parameters and trying to get a really good handle on why we see the changes we see. When we see improvements, we want to know why we're seeing the improvements too, not just the declines. We want to know the whole story. All right, how many of you have seen some of these articles in the paper in the last few weeks? Anybody seen any of these Bloom articles? So we saw a lot of them last year too. We had a really big bloom last year, and that was why we're seeing a tremendous amount of decline, especially in the North Lagoon and Banana River. Well, it's back again. We're seeing, it's a different species this time though, but we are seeing another really big bloom. This time it's hitting Mosquito Lagoon the worst. We are seeing some of it in Banana River as well, and North IRL is getting hit pretty hard. So we've got a consortium of about 25 different scientists together right now to try to figure out why we're seeing these repeated blooms like this. If this is a brown tide, which is what we suspect it is, we have scientists in New York and out in Gainesville that are looking into it for us right now. If it is a brown tide, this is the first big brown tide bloom we've ever seen in the Indian River Lagoon. So it's a little bit alarming, and we want to know why it's happening and if there's anything that we can do to prevent it in the future. So this is what it looks like out there right now. This is not a pretty lagoon. This is Banana River, and this isn't a doctored photo. This is really what it looks like. This was Banana River during the bloom of last year. This green right here, this is what the color of the water is looking like. And I don't know if you can make out the discolored filter paper here, but it was just loaded with phytoplankton, with a microscopic algae. Last year, we were seeing over 21 million cells per liter out in the lagoon in a water sample of these different phytoplankton. So tremendous number. And that amount of phytoplankton can take up a lot of light. And that's, again, why we're seeing those impacts on our seagrass. Right? Don't get overwhelmed by this. I don't want you to have to try to figure out what all of this is saying, but I do want to just show you the amount of data that we get. And I want to make sure that you all realize our water quality data, it's open to anyone to take advantage of it. So if any of you have a project going on out in the lagoon and you want data for that area, I can almost guarantee that we've got data somewhere in the vicinity. We have been taking data in the lagoon since the 80s, and we have a huge database, and we are happy to share it with other scientists. So please call me anytime if there's something that you want. This is along this line here. This is a chlorophyll analysis. This is salinity. They don't have anything to do with each other. It's just, I just want to show you a couple of the different parameters. This TEP down here, this is during the 2011 bloom. These are just different timelines down here. And so this chlorophyll you can see is dramatically different than the rest of it. This is leading up to the big algae bloom last year. And you can see that we saw it higher in Mosquito Lagoon. North Central Lagoon didn't really see the kind of increase. We weren't as impacted there, but you see it in Northern IRL as well. We're seeing this salinity climb. We're seeing higher salinity throughout pretty much all sections of the lagoon lately. This tropical storm might take care of some of that for us. I don't know. We like high salinity. It's not bad, but it's just different. So this is another parameter that we take, KD. This is a measure of light. What a K value is it's a light attenuation coefficient. It tells you how much water can penetrate down to the bottom. So this is one of my coworkers, Jan, and she's taken some LICOR data. She's got what we call our car tree out there. And it has 3 different sensors on it, and it takes readings of the amount of light reaching the bottom. And what I just want to point out is this one here, again, during the bloom, how low the light levels were, again here. So we're seeing these impacts in our light. So what is it doing? Well, it's seeing that decline in our seagrass. So this is the amount of change that we saw from 2010 to 2011 during the bloom, summer 2010 to summer 2011. And these are individual transects. You don't necessarily have to know exactly which site this is to see that this whole northern section of the lagoon, the whole northern half, has seen some decline. If you had talked to me 2 years ago, this all would have been a very positive, happy, lagoon is a great place, perfect story. But we had this bloom come in, and it really has impacted things a lot. All right, so I'm going to shift gears a little bit and just tell you about a couple other projects that I get to be involved in. And this is a really nice thing about my job is I do get this nice variety of things. It's not always the same thing. We got to look at some impacts of drift algae on seagrass. We had a study that we did looking at how long it would take the seagrass to die off if it was completely covered by drift algae. So that was a pretty neat project we got to participate in. We look at the storm impact. We look at what's going on when we have a storm come in. So this is pretty timely. I mean, we might be getting some pretty heavy rainfall I'm not sure what sort of numbers. I had heard 11 inches. Tropical Storm Faye was 25 inches of rain. When we have something like that happen, to be able to monitor it and to see what sort of impacts it has is really important. In 2004, any of you that were here in 2004 remember it was just one storm after the other that we got hit by. Well, I'm here to tell you the lagoon wasn't impacted by it, because when we had the storms come in, we saw this storm surge come up, and as soon as the storms went away, it came right back down and the lagoon flushed right back out. So we really didn't see the kind of impacts that we saw during Tropical Storm Faye, which did not have a storm surge, but just had all that rainfall, all that fresh water and all that runoff just sitting there, rather than flushing back out of our inlet. So, different storms can really impact very differently, and it's good to know what they are capable of. I've been real fortunate that I've gotten to work with some of the scientists in the area on our federally threatened Halophila johnsonii seagrass species. I was able to work with Bob Bernstein, who's been working on seagrass since the 70s, and we were looking at a new northern limit for Halophila johnsonii and Halophila decipiens, two of our grass species out there. And it was pretty neat to see that, to be able to answer some questions for the Johnsonii recovery team and tell them some of the things that we were seeing with the expansion of the species. So to be able to monitor some of this is pretty neat too. All right. So doing all this monitoring, well, what do you do with it? You just kind of keep it in your database? Oh, publish it. People want to know. If you do your master's work, if you do any kind of undergraduate research, present it, publish it, get it out there. If you do it and you just hand it to your teacher and that's all that ever happens to it, well, we don't get the benefit of it. The other scientists in the area, we want to know what you've done. We want to know what you found out. So publish it. It's really important to get that out there. And on the topic of publications, read as many publications as you can. Offer to review publications for people, for any of the other students, for your friends, for colleagues. I've reviewed papers for scientific journals. You learn so much by reading other people's work. And the more you read, the more of these publications you work with, the more comfortable you're going to be doing your own technical writing. It's totally different than any kind of creative writing you could think of. So you want to get more comfortable with doing that. And as far as presentations go, give presentations, and I don't mean just do a poster. I mean present it. Even if it's scary, even if it's 200 people, do it anyway. You'll overcome your fear. All right, this next decision, this really is a decision. And I feel like everybody has good days and bad days. Do I love going to work every single day? Well, not every day. Some days I really don't feel like it. Some days I know are going to be really long days. But you have to choose to do what you love and love what you do. You've got to take the good with the bad and the bad with the good. Politics are going to change many times through the course of your career, and sometimes they're really going to frustrate you. But don't let it get you down, because if you let that control your attitude, you're just going to be miserable all the time. Take it from me. So choose to love what you do. I started talking about how I was going to swim with Shamu and how I was going to swim with the dolphins, and I didn't get to do that, but I love what I do even more than if I was doing that. At least I think I do. And I don't know if that's just because I've made the choice to, or because I really wouldn't have liked that. I don't know. But I do get to work with those nice animals sometimes. So here I'm comforting a manatee that we had to, we did a capture up at the SPL plant. We were doing some manatee tagging with USGS and the Fish and Wildlife Group. So again, back to making contacts. I wouldn't get the opportunity to do this kind of stuff because this really isn't in my job description, but I get those opportunities because of those contacts I've made. They've helped us do some seagrass work, and when they need help capturing manatees, I'm the first one to step up and say, let me at them. So during 2010, we had some really, really, really cold weather come through Florida. We had a lot of animals that were impacted by it. I was not able to get in the water because we were getting water temperatures in the 40s, upper 30s. There's no way to be able to stick your head in the water and count seagrass in that kind of temperature. We're just not going to do it. It's not safe. But that didn't mean that I sat in my office and stared out the window thinking, oh, I really wish I could be out in the field. I got out in the field and I did something else. There were groups that needed help. We were seeing a tremendous amount of animals get affected by this cold stunning event. We see there's tarpon, pinfish, mohara, ladyfish, lots of different fish impacted. This is a bunch of look down that were impacted by the cold stun. More mohara and ladyfish. And we saw pelicans being impacted. These are a bunch of manatees down here by one of the power plants. We saw gators wash up, stingrays washing up. And the part that I was privileged enough to help with was the rescuing of the stunned sea turtles. I don't know if any of you guys read about this in the paper too. It was all over the place, but the temperatures dropped so quickly that the turtles really couldn't respond. And so we were finding them just floating out in the lagoon, unable to move, unable to do anything. They looked like little coconuts. You'd pull up on them and you'd just see the very top of their shell. And every once in a while you'd see one lift their head to try to take a breath. But they were in a lot of danger from boat impacts and from birds predating on them. So we went out there and did the only thing we knew how to do. We went out and rescued them. It was an amazing organized rescue of hundreds of people that got put together to rescue hundreds of turtles. When we brought them in, we had to survey them to see if they had any of the fibropapillomas, the PAP virus that they get, and we were separating the sick ones from the non-sick ones. And I say sick, but it's not sick like dying sick. They're just impacted by these growths on them. So, but we didn't want to spread that, so we went ahead and separated them out. We had to slowly warm them up. I mean, it would almost be comical if it wasn't so sad. We had these turtles just everywhere in the warehouse, covered by these warming blankets, flannels. I mean, it was really pretty amazing to look at. Every day we would get there first thing in the morning, and it was just, I mean, there were turtles everywhere. It was like hopscotching over them. It gave us our secondary objective that was kind of an unexpected thing that came out of it is we were able to take a tremendous amount of data. I personally had no idea how many turtles we had out in the lagoon. I mean, I would have never in a million years thought there were this many out there, but it was pretty amazing. So we were able to take a lot of data on them and learn a lot about where they are and what sizes we had and what species we had and how many of them were infected with PAP and so on. Every day more came in. Every day we reached capacity. Every time we would think it was starting to slow down and we would get to go home, be around 5 o'clock, and we'd be like, oh, finally slowing down. And I think most of that was the biologists weren't out on the water anymore. You know, they were hauling it in. And then we'd get a call from the fishermen. I have 4. Okay, bring them in. So, I mean, we were driving out to Wheelatka. We were driving up to Jacksonville. We were driving to Marineland. We were just taking them everywhere we can to hold on to them until we would have the opportunity to release them again. There were some crazy 16, 17-hour days, but they were worth it in the end. Some of the injured ones we had to take off to SeaWorld, or they went to areas that they were able to be treated. Some of the injured ones that came in were they were predated on by birds. They would peck at their eyes and things like that, so they needed to get treatment of some sort. But the great thing was when we got to re-release them, the number of turtles that we were able to save was really pretty impressive. So this is the release day, and we had a lot of fun that day. Every once in a while, I get to do some of the adrenaline-inducing stuff too. So we do some gator tagging on occasion with NASA, and that's pretty exciting stuff. So I missed something really big, though, in talking about my career and what I do. Something really big that happened 3 times. So I do have a family. I have 3 kids. My daughter is 10, and my boys are 7 and 5. And from the time they were born, I shared the love of what I do with them. And one of the things that always impresses me, especially with my middle son, with Evan, the one who's holding the horseshoe crab down here in this picture, he's so intrigued by every animal that we encounter out there. And I have the opportunity sometimes to go into their school and bring some critters, bring in a critter tank for them and show them some of the stuff. And they're not afraid of anything out there, and I love that. I do triathlons, and sometimes I get out in the lagoon when people are getting ready to do their swim, and people are kind of like tiptoeing. They don't want to step anywhere, and they're really nervous. And instead of being nervous about the fact that you're going to be swimming with 300 people kicking you in the head, they're nervous about being in the lagoon. And that just always seems so ludicrous to me, but I guess it's just what you don't, think. People are afraid of what they don't know. My kids have never been afraid of the lagoon. Evan will never tell you that sharp tail on that horseshoe crab is going to hurt somebody or is going to stab something. He'll tell you it's used to flip them back upright if they get turned upside down. My daughter will tell you that a stingray barb, they're not going to use their barb to try to catch something or to try to hurt something. They're going to use it to defend themselves. probably a lot of you watched Shark Week last week. I was watching it with my kids, and my 7-year-old said something really funny that I don't even know where he got it from, but he just came out of nowhere and said, you know, Mom, I bet you there are more people that die from vacuum cleaners than there are that die from great white attacks. I don't know where he got that. I don't know if he heard it on the show. I don't even know if it's even remotely true. But I love that he's a critical thinker, and I love that he's not afraid of it. And, you know, we watched Shark Week, and we went to the beach, and he went out on his boogie board. And at one point, he turned to me, and he said, does my boogie board look like a seal? And I said, well, it could look like a seal. I said, but do you see any great whites? Are you their food? And, you know, no. And he just laughed, and he went out there and played. So, you know, I love that my kids have a love for the environment the way that I do, and I'm really glad that they do. It'd be hard if they didn't. If our children see the relevance of biology and the IRL in their everyday life, they're going to get more motivated to explore that subject and to tell others about it. My kids love teaching people about the lagoon. If anyone around them calls it a river, it's not a river, it's a lagoon. It's not a river. I mean, they'll be the first to correct you on that. I know Dr. Spring wanted me to talk about how I balance my career and my family life, how I balance kids with my career. And I'm not going to lie, it's not easy. There are times that it's really hard. But I did get a couple opportunities working for the district that I was very fortunate. When I had my daughter, I was able to job share my position, and I only worked 2 days a week for 14 months. So I was able to stay home with her for a good portion of that first year of her life. It was great. I just recently, in the last month, changed my work schedule to now I'm working 4 10-hour days instead of 5 days a week, so that every Friday I can go into my kids' school and volunteer. My youngest just started kindergarten, and I want to be able to volunteer while they still want me around, while they still want me at school. So you can balance it. It takes some work, and but don't be afraid to ask your employer. They want it to work out for you too. You'll stay there longer. They don't want to lose somebody with 16 years of experience just because they want to alter their work schedule. So you'd be surprised how much they'll work with you. You just got to be willing to ask. Sometimes you just have to be willing to take your loved ones in the field with you. This is my mom and dad in this picture here. And I was working on my master's work. They were down in Florida on vacation, and I needed to go out and collect some plants. So I took them with me, and they collected with me. My husband is in this picture here. He was doing some seagrass work with me by Sebastian. And this is my brother. He was down here on vacation from New York, and I needed to go do some Johnsonii surveys down south, and said, well, if you want to spend time with me, you got to come with me. So he came, but it doesn't look like he's having too bad of a time. A lot of people say, don't bring work home with you. A lot of people say, well, whatever you do, don't bring work home with you. Well, I think those are people that don't love what they do. I think that there are occasions when it's just fine to bring work home with you. It just depends on what kind of, I don't bring the stressful stuff home, but this day I brought home an exotic jellyfish because I needed to dissect it to send to a scientist out at Dolphin Island, Monty Graham, who was doing some research on it. And so my friend Jim came over, and we sat in my driveway and dissected the jellyfish. And my kids got to see it, and it became a learning experience for them to teach them about exotic species and why we're concerned about it. And so I think it's okay to bring work home with you. You just have to bring the right work home with you. And if you love it, it's not a chore. All right. It's not always fun and games. It's not always sunshine and roses. Sometimes it's really, really, really cold out there where the only part of your body you want to show is your forehead. It does get really cold. I can't imagine if I had actually stayed in New York what it would be like to do this kind of job up there. I guess you don't. Sometimes those jellyfish are dissecting, fight back. This is not me, but I have a funny story that I want to tell about putting in boats at boat ramps. And I've had people come up to me. Sometimes you deal with interesting people in the public. And I had a guy come drive up once when I was getting ready to load my boat up. And one of my coworkers, another woman, was backing the trailer down, and I was getting ready, and I just drive it right up onto the trailer, and then she pulled me out, and we unload all of our gear. And there was a guy that pulled up right next to the ramp, and he just turned off his car, and he just sat there. And when we were done loading up and drive it up, unloading all of our gear, he came over and he said, I have to apologize to you about something. I said, okay. He said, what happened, sir? And he said, well, I saw 2 women getting ready to load up a boat, and I thought to myself, this is going to be a fiasco. So he was ready to just watch us do something like this because we were a couple of women. And I have to say, I love that story because I love that we gave him an opportunity we changed his view. I mean, he came up and apologized. I thought that took a lot of guts for him to come up and tell me what he thought he was going to see and apologize for it. I thought that was pretty cool. So we showed him. Sometimes the boat doesn't want to start. Sometimes it starts with a bang and we start fires. That happens on occasion. We have a lot of flat tires, but as you can see, we always change them with a smile, so it's not always perfect. But all of those bad days and all of those difficult days, they go right out the window because I love what I do. And this is my daughter. She was 2 years old. We were up in Maine, one of my favorite vacation places. And when you love what you do, it shows. And I really believe that it'll help our children go from this stage of curiosity about this algae to this one. And the stage of success. This is my daughter at science fair. She came in second place for her area. It was the first science fair she'd ever done. And it wasn't me. She did a project on parsley, of all things. So, but really, I mean, what better way to find our future women in marine science than to encourage them to make decisions that will bring them to a place where they get to do the things that they love to, just like I do. And I think I've really instilled that in my daughter and my boys. And hopefully you guys are able to take away something from some of the decisions that I've made and be able to have that confidence to make those decisions yourself and advance your career. So I'd be happy to take any questions. Oh, and before I start taking questions, I do have to tell you that we have, I mentioned interns and volunteers. We do have an intern program and we do have a volunteer program. Our positions get advertised on our website. So if you guys are ever interested, check us out. We've got these positions that come up. Unfortunately, they're not paid, but it doesn't matter. I'm telling you, it's important anyway. So you can do it. All right, thanks.
Questions for Lauren? No questions? All right, I have a question. What is the reason